Welcome to this month's not White Coat Wednesday, because we do a lot of those, but welcome to this month's webinar, which is titled Meet Our Medical School Leaders. We have some great information to share with you tonight, so we look forward to doing such. I am Lionel Edmonds, the Program Manager of Admission Enrollment, and I'd like to introduce some of our guests tonight. Manning our chat room for questions is my counterpart, Suba Ross. We also have our UQ team on for support. Yes, they are logged in all the way from Australia. We look forward to having them joining us tonight. I'll go ahead and share my screen and introduce some of the panelists. All right, let me go ahead and get those introductions out of the way. First, we have Professor Ron Amity, Director of our Ochsner Clinical School. We do have to give apologies as he will not be joining us tonight due to some schedule conflict. Don't worry, we will not miss any of his information as our other panelists have agreed to share his information with us. First up tonight will be Assistant Professor Dr. Charles Cantrell, who's also the Deputy Director of Curriculum, followed by Assistant Professor Dr. Tamika Webb-Detige, who's our Deputy Head of Admissions and Enrollment. And then we also have our fourth-year medical student, Ainsley Jonas, who's also our president, our OMSA president. So we'll go ahead and jump on in. Always like to show you guys where we're located. Before we jump in, one more thing, chat questions. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and drop those in the chat box. We'll make sure we try to get to every question answered. With that being said, I'd like to go ahead and give it on over to Dr. Cantrell.
Thank you, Lionel. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Happy to have you here. We rotate that next slide. So, who are we? An interesting combination of schools is what we really are. Australia is a very large place, and University of Queensland is a very large place. It's a very large school. They are one of the top ranked schools in Australia. Actually, #1 for research and #1 for fellowships and awards, kind of like our NRH. They have literally over 452 awards worth almost $300 million just from that particular school. They have 8 globally recognized research institutes, and they are a huge entity. They have 56,000 students from 137 countries. So, it is a big, big deal. It's a top 50 university. They have 6 faculties. Medicine's one of those faculties. And they have 30 plus teaching and research sites and 8 complete institutes specifically for research in specific areas. They are massive and are a wonderful match for us. We're a pretty large place here in the U.S. We're down in Louisiana. That little purple spot you can see there, that's us, that purple state. Ochsner Health is a pretty large entity. We have 40 hospitals and 100 health centers. We employ over 1,300 physicians in 90 different specialties, and we are rated the #1 hospital in Louisiana by U.S. World Report. Next slide. So let's talk about our curriculum. What would you be doing if you came to UQ, and what's the education like? So we're looking at an updated MD curriculum that we're currently working on now and is in process. It's actually being used in the first year. What we recognize is that patient and population needs, particularly around chronic condition and comorbidities, we have an aging population and we have a massive health inequities problem. So curriculum is to help address that. We are developing models of care that are designed to shift and be evaluated and improved over time. We do a lot of team-based care. We do digital health care, and we have our primary care center. The curriculum is designed to help towards that end. We know that the doctors of the future are going to need a lot of new knowledge because the technology is changing almost faster than many people can keep up with it. So you need a great education on the basics and how to be a great doctor, and then how to use this information and how to use the technology to help your patients. You also have to be able to use it to take care of your students, and we do. We provide feedback to our students, to our graduates, to their supervisors. We are always looking for ways to really improve the program, and really that circle of feedback is very, very, very important in continuing to make this school better every day. And any place that doesn't do this is probably not something you should be looking at. Next slide. So our program is a new program that's coming. We've used a traditional approach to medical school in the past. And in this first year, we are using what's called a longitudinal integrated curriculum, also known as the LIC. So the longitudinal integrated curriculum really works on 3-year-long courses and for their first 3 years. And in the 4th year is a year split into semesters that allows folks to go and do the clinical work that they need to do, particularly here in the US, to get exposure to the different things. We have programmatic assessment. You have very early and expanded clinical experience. So in your first year, where in the past people would be in a classroom or in a lab studying and learning the basic sciences, you will still have that, but you will have that as well as integrating some opportunities to see patients and to see some of the things that you're learning about real time as you're learning it. So it really provides for greater student opportunities, better student choice, and really focus on transition into practice. Less about remembering and knowledge about minutia, and more about how to integrate that knowledge into the care of the patient. How do you become a safe and effective clinician? How do you work through that? So here's what it looks like. Year 1 is a year-long course. It's considered 16 units, so that's a year's long course. And here's what the thing that I want you to notice as we go through this: 4 structured days of teaching and 1 day of clinically focused teaching. So we're talking that in year 1, you're going to get a day every week that you're going to have clinically focused teaching along with that structured learning that you need to learn. Year 2, again, a 16-unit course, you're going to have 3 structured days of teaching and 2 clinical longitudinal placements. Longitudinal meaning you're going to do them for the whole year, so you get to see how's the patient. You don't go see a patient one day and then not know what happened to them. You'll be able to go back on successive days and see how did they progress, how did things go, what's working, what's not working. And that'll predominantly be in medicine, surgery, and in general practice. Year 3, again, a 16-unit course. Notice 1 day of structured teaching, 4 days of clinical immersion. That's your 3rd year medical school. And that's classically what happens in here currently in the US. But again, it's a more of an immersion where you'll be working in and out of a number of different areas while you're there. So you'll do some pediatrics, you'll do some OB, you'll do some mental health, you'll do internal medicine, you'll do surgery. You're going to get all of the basic stuff to advance through that. And then in year 4, the first half, again, between a half a day and a day of structured teaching, the rest is clinical experience. That's really where it's at in your 4th year. And there will be in the first half of the year a significant amount of clinical experience that is part of the curriculum. And then there will be some freer curriculum in the second half of the year where you can go and do electives and go do opportunities where you can do audition rotations as a 4th year medical student. Often very important if you're going into a very challenging area. So it's an opportunity for everybody to really get a unique experience in a much different, not in a box, but in a longitudinal approach. It's really a much more helpful way to learn and a better way to learn, truthfully. Next slide. So the experiences will include workshops, again, where you work and debate and argue and figure out what's going on. There'll be master classes where the experts are going to come in and teach you about how do you really do this? What is it? What really happens when you see it? There'll be a symposia where you'll have experts and have patients where they can actually talk through how some of these things happen. And honestly, it's amazing to get feedback from a patient about how things went. That's ultimately really where you learn a lot about medicine. There'll be sessions led by clinical experts called plenaries. There'll be lectorials, which are lectures with active learning through student engagement and problem solving. There'll be practicals where you do the hands-on stuff. A lot of team-based learning. Medicine is a team sport. And you can't do this by yourself. You can't do it without the nurses. You can't do it without your partners. You can't do it without all of the different parts of medicine. You really need it all. And we'll do some clinical and procedural skills because clearly you need to know how to do that kind of work. And then there'll be the foundations of how do you take a history? How do you do an exam? How do you communicate? All of that's going to be built in throughout this, because that's really the source of how you become a great profession. Can you communicate? You may have the knowledge, but if you can't communicate, you're really not much good to anybody. Next slide. So we have a number of teaching locations: St. Lucia campus and the Greater Brisbane Clinical School, that's in Australia. The Ochsner Clinical School, that's here in New Orleans, and then the Rural Clinical School, and that is in the Outback. And they have really 4 locations in the Outback. And when you're in Australia, you may have the opportunity to go and see some of those. It's a really neat and unique opportunity to see that environment. Next slide. So what we're looking for some key personal attributes in our students. That you need to be a team player and really be able to communicate with somebody. You need to be organized, but you need to be flexible. Being organized and allow yourself the flexibility to be able to understand when some things are not going to work. You got to be able to problem solve, and you have to have the capacity for some self-directed learning. There is no way any one person can teach you everything. You have to learn some of this yourself. And then really, ultimately, if you don't have a genuine interest in people, this is probably not the game for you. This is something that's critical for us. We need folks who care about people to take care of people. I think that's all for me, Lionel.
Yes, but before we move on, I know we jumped straight into it, which we really appreciate. Would you be able to give us a little bit about you and your background and then your role for the school?
Yeah, so I'm a general pediatrician, well, baby doc. My background is that I have been involved with teaching here for a long time. Was a program director for the residency, for our pediatric residency, and I got involved with the medical school. I was running the pediatric clerkship, and then I've now moved up to manage the curriculum for the Ochsner Clinical School. And so I had a good time doing that. Still practice half time. I enjoyed my patients and enjoyed spending time with them. And that's actually the highlight of my day. So, and I really enjoy spending the time that I get with the students, because they teach me every day something new.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cantro, for that. We'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Webb. If you could also give us a little bit about your background, who you are, and your position at the school.
So good afternoon/evening to everyone. My name is Dr. Tamika Webb-Detige. I am a rheumatologist by trade, which is the best specialty. You will learn that if you come to medical school. You will learn that rheumatologists are great, and you should consider it as a specialty. But we'll talk more about that when you actually get here. My role with the school, besides teaching medical students, residents, and fellows about rheumatology, is as the deputy head of admissions and enrollment. And so I get to see you at the beginning, but I also get to see you through the process. So it's an excellent position to be in, to kind of remember what it was like to be in the beginning of my journey to medicine. I was asked also to talk about my journey to medicine. And much like you all, I was probably someone in high school who really thought that math and science was great, and I did well. And so I looked at careers that were math and science, looked at engineering, looked at pharmacy, and then I went to undergrad. And I jumped into biology as a major. I bet a lot of you are biology majors or chemistry majors, and I did research. And that research allowed me to see in depth science. And so I would work on something called Medaka fish eggs, studying meiosis and mitosis. I'm getting too deep. And we would do work with fluorescein. So I had to work in the dark, because fluorescein at that time could only be used in the dark. So I would come to work early, set my experiments up, it's dark. I work in the dark, and then I leave late in the dark. And what I learned from that is that I miss people. And as Dr. Cantro said, in medicine, you have to be somebody who is interested in caring for people. Even if you take a job later on, the road through medicine is caring for patients. Even if you say, I'm just going to be a researcher, have an MD, you need to be able to deal with patients. And so I learned that's what I needed to do. And so I moved forward with medicine. So that's my journey. I talk fast because I'm from Philadelphia. I'll try to slow that down, but I've been in New Orleans for 15 years. So I kind of have a little bit of New Orleans sayings too. So when my team goes out to talk about the school, they often hear, no, is that too good to be true? And the question is, and the answer is, it's not too good to be true. Let's go to our next slide. In anything you do in life, you want to see the result. And in order to become a physician, you need to be able to complete medical school and get a residency and complete that. So here is the proof that we are not too good to be true. We are exactly who we say we are. This is a chart that goes over our match rates. So finish medical school, you enter the match, and here are the rates here. So one thing you should know overall, in the past 10 years, we have matched or exceeded the rates that US medical schools have. Now, in terms of our overall average match rate from 2013 to 2023, the last 10 years, it's been 95%, and that is excellent. So let's go through this table we have here. Our first column is years, starting at 2023, going down to 2019. The next column is the number of positions available in the match, and next to that is the total number of applications. So look at 2023. You can see the number of positions were 40,375. The total number of applications, 42,952. So we're all math lovers here. We can tell that there were more applications than there were positions available. So that means that some people did not match. And it's important that you look at schools that have excellent match rates. So for UQ-Ochsner, the next column over, you can see we had a 96% match rate. And we believe that that match rate comes through the quality of the students we select, the quality of the education we have, and the quality of our graduates who have gone out and gone to programs and shown what we can do. So we have 96% in 2023, 98% in 2022, 97% 2021, 95 and 93, so on. So you compare that to the next column, MD seniors, those are US medical graduates. And you can see comparing us pound for pound as if we were fighters, we're pretty much with them. And then a lot of times, like I said before, outmatching them. So you will be able to get a residency position if you successfully move through our program. The next column is DO seniors. So DOs tend to have a lower match rate than US medical grads, as well as our combined international medical grad program that we have. And then if you don't come to it through a program like ours, the match rate for international medical grads much lower. So you're looking at 59% for 2023, 58% for 2022. So this is the proof that we are not too good to be true. We're able to develop and cultivate our students to be successful in the match. Next slide. All right, so how do you get to us? So there are some requirements. You need an MCAT minimum score of 504. You need a GPA, a minimum grade point average of B in your cumulative calculated key degree. So we look at your bachelor's or your master's, depending on what was the most recent degree you obtained. We have 2 subject prerequisites. And so this is where we're different from US medical schools. You don't have to have 2 bios, 2 chemistries, 2 organic chemistries, physics, all this other extra stuff. We expect you to be able to perform, and we want to make sure that you've been exposed to higher level science courses. And so for us, our 2 subject prerequisites are second level courses, and it's integrated cell and tissue biology and systems physiology. Now, you may not have had those specific courses, but when you apply and you submit your transcripts, our team will look and see if there are equivalent courses that you've done already that fit the bill for that. And we'll work with you on that, but you must apply first for that to be evaluated. Next slide. Then the next step is the multiple mini interviews. So we use this to evaluate what are your personal qualities. You know, no one wants to go to a doctor who has no compassion, who doesn't have the ability to communicate. You can know everything, but if you cannot communicate what you know, it's no good to a patient. And the most important person in medicine is the patient. It is not the doctor. And so we need to know that you're going to be able to serve patients, to heal and help them move through life. And so it's important for us to assess both kindness and compassion, integrity, your ability to adapt. Medicine is always changing. You need to be excited about learning new things and being a lifelong learner. Medicine is never stagnant. And if you're stagnant in medicine, you're doing it wrong. And so you need to come with that expectation of always learning and always growing. And your verbal communication skills are important. So unlike a traditional interview where you sit with someone, maybe two people, and you talk, we have 8 successive brief interviews where you will be evaluated by 8 different interviewers. And this allows people to see how you communicate. And it's good for you because you get more people looking at you and more opinions. We conduct these interviews via Zoom, and that's what we'll do for the next year, especially still dealing with COVID situations. Next slide. So our application process is easy. You apply online and it is free. So no more money for you to put out here. So the applications will open in November and you can submit throughout the year. But what you have to understand is that our school is very competitive and there's rolling admission. So it is to your advantage to apply early so that you will not lose out on spots that will become filled as the year progresses. We will interview. We had interviews already in March, and we will continue through the fall until we fill our class. So there's the possibility that we may stop interviews early if we fill our class before that time period. And then the last step is the offer, and we make offers throughout the year. And so we'll start in April and go through until our class is filled. And so next slide, I think that might be it for me. Okay.
We'll stop sharing and then we'll go over to Ainsley, our 4th year OMSA president. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey to medicine, why you chose UQ-Ochsner, and then your role as OMSA president.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Ainsley. I'm a 4th year medical student. I'm originally from Boston. I'm very honored to be serving as this year's Ochsner Medical Student Association. That is a mouthful, but we call it OMSA president. I will be graduating in November because of the timeline is a little bit different. So finishing up in a few months. It's scary to say out loud. And I'm planning on applying for a general surgery residency. So a little bit of more background about myself, and it kind of ties into why I chose UQ-Ochsner, but I went to Tulane for undergrad. So I was exposed to the New Orleans culture, fell in love with it down here very early on. I went back up to Boston, home BU for grad school in public health. And when I started thinking about applying to medical school and really deciding where I wanted to wind up, something that I really focused on was finding a place that my background in public health would feel valuable and I would have the opportunity to kind of incorporate those interests into my desire to become a practicing physician. Also, I really thought it was cool that you got to live in Australia for 2 years. So that helped as well. But overall, I just think there's so much to say about the benefit of learning medicine in 2 completely different healthcare systems. For those of you who may not know, Australia has a more kind of British style healthcare system where everyone has access to care. Their residency structure is different. So there's different names for things like interns, and residents are called registrars. It's just, some hospitals still have paper charts. Their standards of care can kind of differ, and learning the science behind medicine and then being able to see how it can be kind of practiced in 2 very different ways was a fascinating experience. And I think watching all of my peers go through that and then seeing how they are able to engage in New Orleans, it makes you kind of more well-rounded in your ability to pull the parts that you like from both countries and both systems and put them into your own style of practice. Also, I think that if you ask any student at UQ-Ochsner, they all kind of say that it takes a very special type of person to want to go to Australia for 2 years and to want to learn medicine this way. And even though people come from very different backgrounds and the class, some people go to grad school, some people come straight from college, we're all very different. I think that we all got so close during those 2 years in Australia because there's only 100 of us, I think roughly, and we're all kind of thrown into this new country, this new experience together. And we all have such a strong desire to be there that I feel like I have found best friends for life that will support me throughout residency, throughout my career. Even if we wind up in different parts of the country now, I can't imagine having gone through any of this without the people that come to UQ-Ochsner. In terms of transitioning to New Orleans, it was very seamless, surprisingly, even though we had to do it. I had to do it almost a year and a half ago now. So kind of peak COVID. So that was interesting. But the support that you get when you get to New Orleans from the faculty and the student affairs at Ochsner is so amazing. Despite it being a very big hospital, you really walk around and you feel like people know who you are and they say hi to you. And when you have a problem, everyone's very quick to help. And everyone at Ochsner is just so beautifully passionate about caring for the patient population in New Orleans. The patient population here is fascinating to learn from. They're so diverse. They come from far and wide in the South. You see a lot of what people like to call zebras. So diseases that you learn about in med school and you think, and they say in lecture, oh, you might never even see that in your career, but then you get to see it. I think I saw my first week when I got to New Orleans, I saw a woman who had a disease that the incidence rate is like 1 in 7 million. So that was very cool. And I've actually seen 2 of those same cases in my year and a half here. But yeah, so people really, they make you feel like you're a part of the community and a part of the team, even though you're only here for maybe 2 years. The providers really work with you. They grow to trust you. You see the same people all the time, in the sense that like when you're walking around, or you might be on one team this week and then you a couple months later go back and they remember you. And as time goes on, you really start to feel like they trust you. And at this point in my 4th year, it's kind of amazing. I feel a lot of the times like an intern, in the sense that they'll send me to do things by myself and do small procedures by myself. And it just feels really amazing to have people have your back like that, and kind of they believe in you even when you're kind of nervous. So I would not have done med school any differently. I love New Orleans. I very much would love to stay. Hint, hint to all the faculty. But but I really think that like the people that come to this type of program and then the support that you get both in Australia and here is unparalleled, especially having heard from friends maybe in other med schools where the focus kind of is on like test scores and things like that. I think it's really about finding a place where you feel like you're going to be supported and being able to forge those relationships that will take you very far, because I'm sure I will still have these relationships with faculty and my friends for years to come, and that will serve me very well. A little bit of background about OMSA. So we are the Ochsner Medical Student Association. We just call it OMSA. You can follow us on Instagram. We do some fun things like takeovers and White Coat Wednesdays and featuring graduates and things like that. But we are a group of students. I think there's about 10 of us. Everyone has a different role. So there's like a social chair, there is a treasurer, there is a liaison that works with networking and getting you in contact with graduates and things like that. And there's representatives from every year. And we meet with student affairs and whatever faculty feels passionate about being involved or that we might need help from, about once or twice a month. And I think it's been just an amazing experience on my end to see how much the staff really cares about the student experience, and they really listen to us and they work with us to improve everyone's experience. You can have a problem on Monday and they'll solve it by Friday, which is amazing. And then we get to plan fun stuff. We plan social events. We had field day. I think Dr. Cantro even went in the dunk tank a couple weeks ago. So you get to dunk your favorite faculty, which is a lot of fun. And then we also get to help students network with graduates or people in certain specialties that they might be interested in, so that you can feel supported when you're applying to residency, which is amazing as you get into your 4th year. And that I think about sums it up, but I can answer questions. I'll be here.
All right, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. We'll go over to Sue, my counterpart. We do have some questions in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter that into the chat room, and Sue and I will both direct those to the necessary parties. Sue, what do we have up first? You're muted. You're muted, Sue.
Thank you, Lionel. Our first question is in regard to prerequisites. So I'll send this to Dr. Webb. Regarding the 2 prerequisite courses, do those need to be completed at the time of our application or prior to matriculation if they haven't graduated yet?
So the prerequisites, you can receive an offer, but it'll be a conditional offer and you will have a time period to complete it. Now, it definitely would be before matriculation, but we need to know in a timely manner that you're going to complete them. And if you don't, to allow someone else who's completed to move forward. So we'll let you know when you have to have those done, but you can interview and move forward with the process with those prerequisites in progress.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Probably this next is for you as well. Could you please expand on the meaning of rolling admissions? I read there would be spots open as early as January 2024. There's a second part, but go ahead.
So I'm confused about spots. So we will allow people to receive admission starting now. We had our March interviews and you will be given a position in the class based on completing everything successfully. We'll continue to interview and we'll fill the class. Now, if we fill before fall, then we'll stop adding people on. If for some reason someone says later on they can't move forward, we will then look at candidates that have interviewed and may have been on a wait list to move them forward. So we don't hold spots open for anyone. We fill our class, and if something comes available, then it may be an offer may be extended to someone who interviewed but didn't make it in time.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. The second half of that question asks if the November applications are possible for January 2024. And it doesn't say what year. So if it was November 2023, then yes, right? But if you intend to apply in November 2024.
So as Ainsley brought up, we have our academic year from January to November. And so right now you're interviewing to start January 2024. That's what this interview time period is for now. And so yes, anybody interviewing now is looking to start in January 2024 in Australia.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Webb, before we move on to the next question, what is the normal class size?
So our class size ranges from 80 to 100, but our average is about 90. Some classes have been larger when we've had a lot of people who wanted to come and we were able to make room for them. So Ainsley's class may have been about 100, but it just depends. But our goal is about 90 to 100.
Okay. And I'll jump ahead since we're talking about applications. One question is if she is interested, Alyssa's is interested in starting January 2026, when is the best time to apply? So I do know we'll open that application November of 2024, but then when would you say is the best time to apply?
So the best time to apply is early in that cycle so that you will ensure that the spots haven't been filled. So you want to be in that beginning March season before you start.
If it's helpful, like to give an example, I started in January of 2020, I believe. It feels like it was yesterday, but I applied the February of 2019 and I interviewed in March of 2019 and then was accepted in May of 2019. So I had a long time of knowing, but it's very helpful to know for that long because you need to get a visa, which people will help you with, but you do need to do things like that. So if you're gonna go, you want to start January 2026, I would say the earlier the better. It would be ideal to apply like January, February 2025. Or as soon as applications open, which I don't know if you guys have changed that.
So that would be the November before that January.
Okay. So November 2024 then.
Right. Hey, our next question is about the steps, the step exams. So I'm wondering how step 1 and step 2 are integrated in the new curriculum. So Dr. Cantor.
So we specifically have a course that is included in the curriculum and will continue to be included in the curriculum that occurs in the second half of their second year that is directed at prepping for that step one, because that's always been such a critical thing. Now, as you may be aware, that's changed in that it's no longer a score, it's now a pass-fail opportunity. There used to be a real designer opportunity if you did spectacularly well to do almost any specialty you wanted to. It'll be a little more challenging now because everybody's on the same playing field of you either passed it or you didn't. And that level to pass is a little bit higher than it has been in the past, but very attainable, well within the bounds of what you should be able to do, particularly if you do well on the course that we provide for you during the second half of that second semester.
Thank you, Dr. Cantrell. The next question from Uma is two parts. She would like to know, are classes held on St. Lucia or Hurston campus? And then also, if you can explain a little bit about the CPR certificate requirement.
I can take that one since I went to classes there. But so your classes are held your first year at St. Lucia, lectures and things like that and labs. But then you are assigned a hospital. And so there's like 3 major hospitals in the Brisbane area, and you and a group of subset of students are assigned to those hospitals. And you can study there, and that's where you would go for your like 1 day of clinical teaching your first year. And then second year, all of your lectures and tutorials are actually held at your hospital site. And then, so your connection to St. Lucia really kind of dwindles. So it is better to live, when you start planning that, to live closer to the hospitals, because you only go to St. Lucia for so long. And then all of your clinical rotations or clinical days will be at that hospital site that you're assigned to. And then in terms of the CPR requirements, you have to do like a CPR class your first year, and then you just have to maintain that throughout your time. But it's pretty easy to maintain because you all have to do it together. Like every student has to maintain it, and whatever hospital you're at will offer like a CPR certification, and it takes like an hour. You do it with your friends. It's kind of fun. So it seems like, oh, I have to maintain that. That's like a requirement I have to refulfill every year, but it's not something that ever seems like a hassle when you actually go through it. It's also a good refresher, and it looks good on your CV when you're applying to residency that you have like a basic life support certification and you've maintained CPR, and then 4th year you even have the option to do like an advanced life support certification through Ochsner.
Thank you, Ainsley. Our next question is about cost to attend. The cost for school with tuition, and then also with boarding and living expenses, which I know changes each year and is an estimate that's given. So does anyone want to take that, or?
Dr. Webb?
So the cost that we have was $67,456. That was the cost in 2022. What you need to know is that UQ is accredited by the United States Department of Education, and they can give various needs-based loans to eligible U.S. students and or their parents. It's through the William D. Ford direct loan program, but there are opportunities for you besides having to pay. You can apply for Ochsner's Physician Scholars Program, and this is where you can get up to $135,000 toward your medical school expenses, and you do that in exchange for a commitment to work at Ochsner for 5 years as faculty. And many of you will want to work at Ochsner anyway. So if you're going into those fields, and we're looking for primary care providers, so family medicine, internal medicine, primary care pediatrics, internal medicine combined, primary care psychiatry as well. So you have some opportunities there, not just loans, but scholarship as well.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. So Danny, yes, you can apply before taking the MCAT. You just have to have your date scheduled. And then maybe for Ainsley or Dr. Cantrell, what types of clinical experiences are involved in the first 2 years?
Dr. Cantrell can correct me if this has changed, but I'm assuming they're just going to incorporate kind of what I went through into the new curriculum. But your first year, you're really working with your peers in small groups and physicians, and learning like basic physical exams and signs to look for and kind of how to take a history, how to form a diagnosis based on exam findings and history. And then as you move into your second year, you have like direct contact with patients. So you go into the hospital and you are assigned a physician that will you might for the first day shadow them. And then as they grow to like you, which I'm sure they will, they'll send you to a room and they'll be like, oh, go take a history and then come tell me about it. Go do an exam and tell me what you find. And you kind of are able to work alongside that physician to see their thought process, they walk you through what you think and what your plan would be. And that's actually a lot of fun as a second year med student, which I don't think a lot of schools incorporate direct patient contact that early. And I think that a lot of our students really benefit from it. Like we get to New Orleans and people are shocked that we're only third year medical students because we feel comfortable taking a history. We feel comfortable doing an exam because we had such early exposure in Australia.
Yeah, currently with the new program, that's even earlier. In your first year, you're going to be touching patients and interviewing patients and doing some of that in small portions, but that's definitely part of it, is to get the earlier involvement while you're learning the material, because it's so much easier to learn the material when you're actually applying it to a live person, right? So you go about how gallstones occur, and then you go see somebody with gallstones and you do an exam and realize, oh yeah, that's what they were talking about. It's pretty helpful. And that's the power of that longitudinal curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor-Ainslie. We have a question in the chat room from a parent who's joining, who wants to inquire about the timeline after application. So maybe Dr. Webb, you might want to talk about what happens after an application.
What's the specific question?
Okay, it says, what is the timeline to learn whether your institution will move forward with an application after it's been submitted? And
So
it meets requirements.
it will vary for different applicants depending on the information they need to get from the transcript. And so we can't say a standard time period because they're always trying to collect information from the schools and evaluate if those prerequisites fit. So it would be different for different applicants. The best thing you can do is contact and say, hey, I've submitted my application. Do you know where it stands? And they'll let you know where you are in the process. But it's different for everyone because of the communications and the information that has to be gathered.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. There's a question about the final degree that is received. Is it a US-based degree or an Australian-based degree?
An Australian-based degree from the University of Queensland.
Yes.
What you need to understand is with that degree, you do your residency in the United States, you're able to practice in the United States, and you're also able to practice in Australia. So you have that ability to do both. Now, if you don't do a residency in the United States, you do it only in Australia, which very few of our students do, but some do every year. You are committed to working in Australia because you cannot work in the United States without residency training in the United States.
Thank you.
One more question before you moved on, Sue. I see we missed one. It's about step one. How do students typically perform on step one and step two? And I actually have that graph to share if you want to discuss it, Dr. Webb.
We can let curriculum, Dr. Cantor, do it.
And I have that to share.
What this shows is that
There. All right.
lost me on now.
Here we go.
So our first time pass rate of all students, this is to date in all our years of doing this, that's 846 students, was 88%. The class of 2000, it was 88, and 2001 is 88. The average scores were pretty significantly high, right? Passing was about 205, somewhere in that ballpark. Step two, traditionally our students do even better because that's a much more clinically oriented versus step one's a lot of basic science. Step two is a lot more clinical activities, and our students being as involved as they are in the clinical aspect of it tend to do very, very well. They are at or above the national average. And our pass rate, as you can see here, is 96, 97%. So we do very, very well. Again, step one is now a pass fail. So we're not going to have the numbers to sort of show how lovely and how well our folks did. It's just pass to go on is what it's going to be. You just have to pass it. And that's going to be about, I think the last number I saw was somewhere around a what'd you say, to make like a 208, 209, something like that?
214, I thought is what they were saying.
No, so step one to pass it was 194 before it changed to pass fail, and now it's 197.
197, okay.
Past step one to pass step two, it's a 214.
Sorry, I'm moving ahead, always moving forward.
They're looking at moving it up even a little higher is where the other numbers come from. It's going to probably be, that number probably going to be a little over 200 to pass. But we'll have more information soon related to that.
Well, one thing you can see from that table was that the pass rate increased, and that we think in part by the specialized course at the end of your second year, where you focus on preparing and being ready to be successful. So it's made a difference.
And it does, people felt like they were disadvantaged compared to the U.S. students, which is one of the reasons the course was developed. And that clearly has eliminated that thought process. You guys are clearly in many ways at an advantage now.
And I think that we can make up for that when it comes to step two. I know you kind of mentioned that, but having taken both of them now, step two was so much more refreshing and reassuring than step one for me personally. And I think a lot of my friends, because I was like, oh, this is the type of stuff I've been learning since day one. And I think that really shows in how much we improve and do well in step two.
And in this new world of pass fail for step one, they're going to be looking at those step twos. So it's going to be
step two is the new end all be all. So it's good for us.
Very good for y'all.
Okay, I will combine two questions. One, can you talk a bit about how the LGBTQ community is supported? And are there opportunities for Black students to build community?
So I can take that on in terms of OMSA. So OMSA is like the big umbrella for student government. And then underneath it, we kind of oversee what we call interest groups. And they're funded by student affairs, and they have events throughout the year. And they all have faculty advisors, and they kind of are incorporated into the Ochsner community as much as they want to be. And we have a Black Student Union. The Black Student Union, I think, also works with Tulane and LSU, the two other med schools in the city. And then we also have an LGBTQ focused interest group that just involves anyone that feels like supporting and being involved in that type of alliance. I know every year also Ochsner has a float in the Gay Pride Parade that faculty, residents, everyone really loves to go to and get involved with because it's really fun. So I think anything you're interested in, there's a pickleball interest group, there are interest groups for anyone. You can start any interest group you want, but there is opportunity for you to feel supported and like you can create a community. And student affairs is really, really focused on making sure that it stays that way. And we just continue to build on that, which I think is awesome.
Ainsley, do you feel that students of minorities feel safe in this program?
I can't speak to all minorities because I am a woman. And as a woman, I do feel like I am very supported in the sense that if I ever have an issue, I know where to go. I've been lucky to not experience any type of issues in that regard. But the student affairs community makes it very that if you do have an issue and you bring it up to them, there's a hotline, you can submit anonymous complaints, you can come forward as a student. And in the rare instances where I have seen that as like OMSA president, it is handled so smoothly and swiftly with no impact on the student. I think it's really, really refreshing and amazing that we are so supported by the faculty and staff at Ochsner in that way. At no point in my medical school career have I kind of felt like a med student that stands in the back of the room and people just kind of bash on. I think that people know your name, you're respected. And if you do have an issue, they take it really, really seriously, which is awesome.
Thank you, Ainsley. I'll continue on for a second question for you. Did you notice any significant difference between your exam experiences between years 2 and years 3? The separate areas.
I think that we all felt a little bit nervous about how that would shift in terms of if it was going to be different from being tested in Australia to being tested in New Orleans, but we still take the same exams as the Australian students. We just host them here. So once you kind of get a hang of that, your first 2 years, it's not like you have to readjust when you move to New Orleans. The only difference that I would say is that when you get to year 3, a lot of your exams focus way more on clinical application versus that like science-based minutia. And that could very well be changing with the new curriculum style. It sounds like they're kind of pushing away from that minutia and want to focus on that clinical significance and clinical application from the very beginning. But I would say that that's really the biggest change. And me personally, I would much prefer the clinical application and significance testing. So by the time I got to year 3, I was welcoming the new testing experiences. But it's still Australia UQ exams. So it's not like you're going to get any crazy surprises once you get to New Orleans.
Thank you. We have a question about accreditation. Is UQ-Ochsner a LCME- or COCA accredited medical school?
No, we're Australian medical accredited.
And Ainsley, going back to exams, are some pass fail or they're all graded?
It depends on the exam. Some like standardized clinical scenarios can be pass fail. We're graded on the Australian system. So it's a grade from, I think the lowest is like a 3 to 7 is an A. To pass, you need a 4 or above, I believe, or it's a 4 or 5. But so it is not pass fail. That being said, I don't think that it's made really, I don't feel like we're super competitive with each other, even though we do get grades. But a lot of our grades really focus on specific feedback. So even though you are getting maybe a number grade when you go through a clinical exam or something like that, you get like paragraphs of feedback about specifically what you can improve on, what you can work on. And I think those are the most useful grades at the end of the day. I don't know if that really answers that question, but it is graded.
Thank you. We have a question about international clinical options that are offered. So
We do have some opportunities. Everybody is required to travel back for a rotation in Australia in their 4th year. That is a requirement by the Australian Medical Council. Everybody gets to go home, back to Australia and see their friends, which is actually, I think, a lot of fun. Folks actually look forward to that opportunity. So, but yeah, that's the accreditation is through the Australian Medical Council, not through the LCME.
Yes, I just got back from my Australia rotation. I went in January and February for my 4th year rotation. Because I was there during COVID, I actually had so much fun going back 4th year because I was able to travel way more. It was so much fun to see my friends from 2nd year, and now they're 4th years, like they're almost doctors. It's so crazy to see how we go from being in the library together to now being in the hospital together. And really interesting to go from being a 3rd year here and learning how to engage in a hospital environment and what your role is on the team, to going to Australia and kind of readjusting and finding a new role. And I was like doing things, and my resident was like, why do you do it that way? And I was like, well, that's how I learned in America. And he was like, oh, can you teach me how to do it that way? And then he was teaching me things about, like, I liked the way he was doing something better. So it was a really awesome experience. And I got to go back with a couple of my friends who are also in New Orleans with me. And then we stayed with our friends from Australia. So very much a lot of fun.
thank you, Ainsley. It looks like our questions have slowed.
Yes, looks like we've come to the end. We are at the very end. Actually, it's just about 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So we want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Won't put you guys on the spot today. And we really appreciate all of the information that you're giving out today. Want to say thank you to all our guests. And thank you to our UQ support team also. Let's go. Sue, is there a specific email that you want to enter into the chat if they have any other questions? Ainsley, I don't know if you have a OMSA email that you would like to enter into the chat that they can ask questions to the OMSA representatives at all? I'll
Yes,
let you
I
guys
can
go
put
ahead and drop that
my,
in.
I can put my OMSA email in there, and then you can shoot me an email anytime. Whoever's available can answer that. I know we also host one-on-one Zoom chats, right? So that
Yes.
you can sign up to talk to a student if you have questions. And then, like I said, you can follow OMSA on Instagram, and there's always someone manning the chat. So if you have like little questions, or you just kind of want to see what we do on a day-to-day, it's a fun Instagram follow. So shameless social media plug right there.
Yes, like Ainsley said, we do have the one-on-one chats. If you go to the website, you can request to speak to a student and or an admin staff. So please feel free to do that. And again, I want to say thank you. Good afternoon, a good rest of the day to our UQ counterparts. Good evening, good night to our US students and perspectives. We look forward to seeing you guys next month, which is also a great webinar. We also post a lot on our social media sites. You can check out our White Coat Wednesdays, a bunch of the different videos Ainsley spoke about. We do have a lot of content out there. If you guys have any questions, please reach out. We look forward to seeing your application, or if you have already applied, we look forward to seeing you on campus. Thank you and good day.